So I was having lunch at a local restaurant, and I noticed a couple of guys at the end of the bar were making comments of, I'll just say, an inappropriate nature toward the bartender while she was just trying to do her job. Now, the young woman was mostly ignoring them, but I could see in her reaction that they were making her feel uncomfortable. I'm not a huge guy. I don't go looking for fights. But in that moment, I turned my full 5'6" frame toward those guys, and in a loud voice, a medium loud voice, I said, "Hey guys, that's not appropriate at all." And everything got real quiet. I didn't know what those guys would do. Thankfully, almost immediately, they turned sheepish and started saying, "We're sorry, we were just joking around." And I just stared back at them. Because a joke at another person's expense is never just a joke. Thankfully, that was the end of it. Although on the way back to my car, I did check my back a time or two. Now, that could hardly be called an incident at all, but it meant enough to that young woman that she came by later and thanked me for what I had done. And I said, it's what I would want someone to do for one of my daughters. Standing up to bullies just feels like the right thing to do. Every time I've done it, I've walked away feeling like I've done something that's worth doing. Today, I'd like to highlight a group of people that need us, you and me, to recognize their vulnerability and to stand up to their bullies. I'm talking about transgender people. Now, first, let's make sure we understand what we mean when we use the term transgender. You probably have a birth certificate at home that indicates your sex, which is a doctor's expert opinion based on a brief physical examination of whether you are male or female. But there's another aspect of your sexuality that only you have access to: your gender, your internal sense, apart from your body, of being female or male. And deep down, you know your gender, and nothing could convince you otherwise. Not because of any physical characteristics, but because you know who you are. You could wake up tomorrow morning in a completely different body, and it would be shocking, and it would change your life, but it wouldn't change your gender identity. Instead, your gender would now be different from your sex. Now, for most of us, our gender identity matches what the doctor wrote on our birth certificate. We don't have to think about the difference between gender and sex, really ever. But there have always been a percentage of people whose gender, that internal sense, is different from the sex they were assigned at birth. And that's what we mean when we say transgender. Trans people exist. Some people might wish they didn't, but they do. You might have a hard time understanding or fitting them into your belief system, but they are real people. And my challenge to you today is to decide whether you will be among those who target and bully trans people or those who accept and support them. The summer of 2020. What were you doing during the summer of 2020? Probably looking for excuses to get out of the house and go somewhere. Summer of 2020, I was sitting at home late one night. I had just finished watching The Matrix with my then 16-year-old, and I was sitting patiently on the couch, listening as she courageously began to find her voice and tell me that she is transgender. What would you do if you were in my place? I was an ordained pastor, and an evangelical one at that. Practically everyone that I knew, family, friends, colleagues, clients, mentors, were all part of that evangelical Christian subcommunity. Now, I don't know if you know this about evangelicals, but they're not exactly enthusiastically supportive of trans people. That's not like one of their core values. And for evangelical Christian parents, there's sort of an accepted, well-worn pathway they tend to travel when one of their children comes out as LGBT or Q. And that pathway typically starts with denial, and it winds its way through shame toward pressuring their child to conform. And ultimately, too often, it leads to them rejecting their child. But when my child came out, and I could see that she had so obviously already put herself through that gauntlet of denial, shame, and pressure to conform, my heart was filled with compassion and curiosity and a compelling desire to protect her. And in that very moment, I told her that we would be there for her and we would support her no matter what. A few days later, I was still processing all of this, and I can remember asking my daughter a question that I now see as insensitive, but I asked her, so do you think that you were born transgender, or did something happen that caused you to become transgender? After all, that's what we non-trans people want to argue about, nature or nurture. But my daughter quickly put an end to all that by saying, does it matter? And I had to admit that no, it doesn't matter. Because whether by nature or by nurture, my daughter is transgender. And studies show that trans people have the best outcomes when they receive the full acceptance and support of their loved ones. Now, as an evangelical Christian and a pastor, I still had religious and theological questions to explore as well. But I'm not here to share my faith journey with you, and I'm certainly not here to tell you what your beliefs should be. I'll just say that it was because of my faith and my love for my child that I became a trans ally. Because in that moment, I realized, like never before, that trans people are human. They're human, they're extremely vulnerable, and they need our protection. At this moment in history, trans people are among the most vulnerable people in the United States. In 2024 alone, more than 650 bills were introduced in 43 states and nearly 80 at the federal level targeting trans people and seeking to block them from accessing healthcare, education, legal recognition, and even the right to publicly exist. More than 45 of those bills have passed into law, and 100 of them are still in process. Powerful people openly mock, ridicule, and bully trans people without repercussion. Closer to home, trans people are too often rejected and disowned by their loved ones and their faith communities. The very people they should be able to count on to stand with them and support them. And because they're so often rejected by their families, trans people are at a very high risk of becoming victims of human trafficking. It should be no surprise that all of this takes a severe toll on the mental health of trans people in the U.S. In 2023, the Williams Institute of the UCLA School of Law released a study that indicates that 81% of trans adults in the U.S. have considered taking their own lives. And 42% of trans adults in the U.S. have actually attempted to do so. And those numbers are trending upward as more and more states pass anti-trans legislation. Last November, the Human Rights Campaign sounded the alarm about a growing epidemic of violence towards trans people. In the previous year alone, 33 trans people just like my daughter, had their lives taken from them simply for existing as trans. Trans people are being targeted and they need our protection. We could talk about the many different contributions that trans people make in our culture and in our society. I'll just give one example. How many of you have a smartphone with you here today? Maybe one or two of you do. Yeah, smartphones have become sort of a prerequisite for being a functioning individual in our society. But did you know that smartphones are only possible because of the pioneering work in microchip technology done by a transgender electrical engineer named Lynn Conway? 52 years after Lynn Conway was fired simply for coming out as trans, the company that fired her finally apologized to her and publicly recognized her legacy as a tech trailblazer. And that's just one example. Trans people have distinguished themselves in many different fields, including the sciences, the social sciences, politics, the military, filmmaking, the arts, and on and on. But even as I say this, I wonder, do we really want to live in a world where people have to prove their worth before they can be treated as human and receive basic human rights? Isn't the humanity of trans people enough to offer them our acceptance, our support, and even the love that we so glibly claim that we offer all of our neighbors? Throughout history, people have been called to make a choice between supporting the bully or the victim, the oppressor or the oppressed, the powerful or the vulnerable. And yet today, too many people are rushing to pile on and become trans bullies themselves. I'm confident that's not the person that you want to be. And so today, let me briefly share 3 simple things you can do to support trans people, even if you don't fully understand. First of all, believe them. When trans people tell you who they are and what their experience is like, simply believe them. Second, resolve to do no harm. Avoid shaming, targeting, bullying, ridiculing, or in any way sending bad vibes toward trans people. And refuse to support those who do, because it's just not that hard to not hurt people. And third, use their name and pronouns. If someone in your life consistently and intentionally called you the wrong name or used the wrong pronouns for you, would it make you feel like they respected you, cared about you? Of course not. Call people what they want to be called. We do it all the time for the people that we respect. So 3 simple things: believe them, do no harm, use their name and pronouns. Truly the least that you can do for another human. And yet I guarantee that those 3 simple things can make a big difference in the life of a trans person. And if you really want to make a difference, stand up to the trans bullies. Call out anti-trans comments and jokes. Refuse to support candidates and policies that target trans people. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to engage in lengthy Twitter or Facebook wars. Just be ready to listen and learn and let your voice be heard. Be ready to stand up and say, trans people are human and we need to treat them as human. There's more than one way to stand up to a trans bully. Find your way and let your voice be heard. And you can be a hero. It's what I would want someone to do for one of your children. Thank you.